Hi there, everyone, and welcome to my coloring corner. Today is Work in Progress Wednesday, and I know normally we have this as a live stream. Unfortunately, today I have a bunch of things that have to get done, uh, including leaving the house, and I don't know if I'll be back in time to do a live stream at its regular time. So I'm going to do it this way, and we're going to work with the Poetique watercolor pens. These are a watercolor paint pen that has the paint already in the pen. So we're going to play with these on the picture that we sealed yesterday that we primed. So we are going to work on that. I'm going to switch you on over to the other camera here so that we can talk about the priming that we did. Now, we primed it with the golden satin glazing liquid, and it didn't ripple as much as I thought it would. This taping it down really helped. So it has dried nice and flat, and there's no bleeding, which is fantastic. I'm starting to like coloring books again for at least this process. So what we're going to do is we're just going to color this, and we're going to color it with the paint pens and add some water and see where that gets us. So it's not bleeding out. It's not soaking in really hard, which is good. And we'll be able to tell after a little bit, especially once we start adding some water to it, if it starts to ripple the page or not. So I've got a good layer of this dark pink going on here. And I'm going to take the paint, the water pen that came with the paints, which is this one here. Make sure it's not too wet, but it's still wet enough. Of course, I've got my dauber over on the other side, and we're just going to drag some of that down into this area here. And I don't want it to be too wet, because I don't want it to go any further than that. And then on the other side, we're going to take a blue, and we're going to do this side in that blue. And I'm just going to go over the black lines with it. Sorry about that. My dog has decided that she needs to speak as well. There's nothing out there, Shyla. We had a delivery earlier, and she's still convinced there's somebody outside. All right, so we've got the blue down. And then we're going to, of course, take the brush pen, and we're just going to drag that down. And this agent that I've prepped the page with seems to be doing quite well with not buckling too badly there. So as you can see with watercolor, you get that watercolor spread, which is really cool. And of course, it's going to blend together on the seams where the blue reaches the pink. It's going to start turning a little purple. Let's turn that light down a little bit so you can see what's going on. Now we're going to take, I think, a green. Yeah. And we're just going to fill in this area. Now I do feel it buckling a little bit there where I've done the blue. I think I put a little bit too much water on it. And by the way that the green is bleeding up into it, tells me I have put too much water there. And I could daub that off, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to dry the paintbrush a little bit more. And I'm going to drag this green down into this area here. Now, if you find that you have too much water on your brush, you can, of course, daub it with a bit of paper towel, or you can pick up some of that water with your brush. However, when you do that, you're going to have to refill the area that you've put the paint in, because it's going to remove it. Nope. I don't know why I just did that. I just tried to wipe the brush clean. That's not going to work. All right. So we've got a little bit of purple going on there because of the blend of the pink and the blue together. And a little bit of green. So we're going to continue that process throughout the top end of this picture. And it does seem to be helping quite a bit. That golden sealant or acrylic satin glaze does seem to be helping maintain the integrity of the paper, as well as keeping it stretched. Seemed to, while it dried, seemed to keep it fairly flat. The one thing that I will suggest is when you go over it with your water pen, and when you apply water onto the paper, if you're going over it with a pencil, or if you're going over it with a water pen, or whatever you're going over it with, try not to get a lot of water down. I know it's difficult because water pens sometimes have a mind of their own. And that's the fun part of coloring with watercolor, is sometimes they do. They just have a mind of their own. And that's the cool part of it, is letting them, just do their thing, letting them move together and do their own thing. This is definitely not something that you would want to do with well, I guess you could if you're really good at it, but if you're not really, like, I wouldn't, because I'm not even close to good at it. I wouldn't want to do this for a precision piece, like if I'm doing skin tones or something. I may not want to do that with the watercolor method here. But that's only because I am not a professional whatsoever. I'm not even remotely good at this. I am learning just the same as you guys are as I go along. So everything you see for the first time, I've only seen maybe once or twice. So I'm as new to this as you guys are. So as I get further and further into the picture, you will see that I will learn how much water to put down, how to adjust, and that sort of thing. It all depends upon the paper. It depends upon the amount of water that you're putting down, as well as the amount of paint that is laid down with the paint pens. Now, these are a watercolor ink, or I guess they can't really be called paint, but they are watercolor ink. So the movement is just the same as if it would be with watercolor, as if you had a watercolor palette. It's the exact same movement. Now, like I said, if you get too much water on, you can pick it up and wipe it off. And as you can see, I've got too much water going up, so it's spreading up into those areas because the paper is starting to buckle. So what's happening is there's a lump there, so it's pouring up into the pink and the blue. Nothing we can do about that right now. We can try to flatten it out, but we're just going to have to roll with it. And like I said, watercolor will do what watercolor does. If you don't want it to do that, you don't have to add water to these. You can just paint with these and have just as beautiful of effects without worrying about that watercolor bleed. I kind of like the watercolor bleed, but when I'm coloring with watercolors, I actually really like it to do that because it adds fluidity to the picture. And the reason why we're dealing with watercolors today is, of course, because it is February and it is the month of Aquarius and Pisces. So both of those are water signs. So we're coloring water. Coloring with water to celebrate the water signs. Now, as you saw, I did not bleed that pink down or the blue, and it didn't run anywhere. It's just right where I left it, and it isn't bowing up as much as these two because I haven't added water to them. As soon as I add water to them and pull them down, now it all depends upon how much water is coming off of that brush. You know, if you have just a little bit of water on that brush or coming out of that brush, then it's not going to bleed half as much as if you have a lot of water coming off of that brush. And it's just learning your brushes and learning how much water is going to come out of that brush when you use it. Now I want this area here to bleed a little bit, so I'm actually going over that pink just a touch. We're actually going to add a little bit in there so that it bleeds over into that blue. And as you can see, I've moved enough of the ink from the top to the bottom to actually cover the entire area. And we're going to do the same thing here. I'm going to try to keep the brush as dry as possible so that it doesn't create too much of a bleed into those other colors like this one here did. And the reason why it did that is because my brush was not dry enough. Because with a paint pen brush, a watercolor pen brush like I'm using to drag it down, those release a little bit of water as you go along. There are some that you pump to prime, and this is one of those. You pump to prime it, And once it's primed, this little area down here fills with water, and then it slowly releases it out of the tip. So even though you haven't pumped the water down, it's still moving that water down because you've given it permission to do that with the priming of it in the first place. That's why I always suggest storing your water brushes if you've got them in a jar or a glass this way, if you have water in them, so that they're not filling your lid with water. So as you can see with that one, there's no bleed up. So as we go along here, we're going to, of course, learn more and more on how much water we're putting down and how much water we should be putting down and that sort of thing. Now, watercoloring and that sort of thing is a lot quicker than doing this with colored pencil, of course, because with colored pencil, you try to get everything completely seamless. And with watercolor, basically all you're trying to do is, because it fills all of the white spot for you, because it's a fluid, it's a liquid. So it flows instead of covers. So it flows and fills all of that white spot for you. Now, the only thing that I do want y'all to remember is when you're doing this and you're doing smaller areas, that you watch where you're putting your pen, because you can be doing that smaller area and then turn the page and see that you haven't colored an entire area because your pen just didn't get in there. So as you can see, this pen is getting drier, so it's not releasing as much water and keeping things in a better stagnant place. Now, I could, of course, pump this again and get that water moving if I wanted that fluidity. I like to have things neat and tidy. I don't mind it when it comes to this area here of it combining, but and another thing that I want you to remember is try not to go over things over and over and over again. You can redo it or go over it after it's dried, because if you add too much water, you're going to end up with that buckle even more than normal. Always remember to tape down your picture before you put down the glazing liquid. I showed you yesterday what happens if you don't tape down your picture. And today, after taping down this picture and taking a look at it after it had dried, told us that definitely taping down the picture keeps it as flat as possible. However, as soon as you get it wet, of course that picture, that paper is going to bow again and create that ripple effect. So you have to tape it down. Remember to keep it taped down while you're working with the water, Let it completely dry before you pick it up and take the tape off. Now, I'm finding the reason for this for myself is because as soon as you take that tape off and then let it dry, the expanded paper that is full of water, of course, dries out and shrinks, which causes the paper that is now stretched to ripple because now it's trying to shrink. If you keep it stagnant and steady in one place by taping it down and just leave it there until it's completely dry, it has that ability to go back into the shape that it was supposed to be in. It doesn't have the ability to stretch as far as if you didn't tape it down in the first place. So we're just going to bring this pink down. Now, as you can see with this one here, oh, I missed a spot. It isn't as bled as the rest of them. So I'm getting a better control over how much water is coming out of my pen. However, if I want a little bit more water to come out of my pen, but I don't want to squeeze it because it's going to put out too much water, of course, I can dip it in a glass of water and wipe off the excess. And that gives us a little bit more water, but not a huge amount of water. It gives us the amount that we desire. And of course, if you want a little bit more water, don't wipe off so much off your pen. And like I said before, as you can see, it's getting more and more controlled the longer that I play with it and the more I learn on how much ink is going down, how much pressure is on the pen, and that sort of thing. And I think on Saturday, for our Saturday color and chat, I think we're going to actually color something with the Faber-Castell Pitt pens. So that should be fun. I think I'm going to do a picture out of, I don't know. I will figure it out. It will probably be a Valentine's Day picture because that's what month it is. It's either that or else a mermaid. Maybe I'll do something out of the Creative Haven's new mermaid book that just came out that I reviewed. There we go. So as you see, as we get further and further along, you're going to see the progression and the learning. You know, as I learn more and more on the control of this medium, the better it's going to look. And like I said, it's a learning process with every picture. So start in an area that you can correct later. You won't be able to correct it while you're doing it, but after it is dry, you can go over it and correct it a little bit to get rid of any major issues. But when it's wet like this, trying to correct it is just going to give you further issues. Sometimes they're happy accidents. Sometimes they're a muddy mess. It all depends upon how much you try to correct it and that sort of thing. Now we're just gonna. Now I'm working away from myself right now, so that's a little bit harder for me. But I'm not going to turn this page because it would mean turning the entire board, which is more difficult. If you're a page turner, this process will test you. So I'm going to squeeze this a bit and get a little bit more water flowing through there. But I'm wiping off most of it on my paper towel. Now, if you find that you haven't wiped off enough, just go back to the paper towel and wipe it off. And then we go down into the green. Just giving it a little bit of air, trying to dry it up a little bit on that blue. Put in a little bit too much water. And like I said, it's definitely an experimentation in control, as well as getting to know the medium. And that's exactly what we're doing right now, is we're just experimenting, getting to know as much about the water medium and how to control it as we can possibly learn. Now, I know one mandala isn't going to teach us everything that we need to know on how to control watercolors, but it does help with understanding the process as well as the paper and that sort of thing, and how to deal with the paper. Now, if I was to do this on regular coloring book paper, it would instantly curl. And I have had it completely warp so bad that it was horrible. Not to mention the pilling and peeling of the paper. That was my worst thing, is that it peeled the paper and made the paper a mess. So there wasn't a whole lot of reworking it afterwards, which was not fun at all. So as you go along, like I said, just watch how much water you're putting down. If you're putting down too much water, take your brush and just sop it up a little bit and wipe it off. If you find that there's not enough water, you can do one of two things. You can add some water through dipping it in a glass, which gives you, as far as I'm concerned, a little bit more control over how much water is coming out than squeezing the pen. Or you can squeeze the pen onto a paper towel. Make sure that you don't do it over top of your picture, and then wipe the pen clean. Of course, when you do this, what that does is it primes the pen. And if you're using a pen like this, it fills that reservoir, which slowly leaches bits of water out of the tip of the pen. Now, if you don't want a whole bunch of water coming out of the tip of your pen, make sure that you have a paper towel right close by and give it a good wiping before you use it on your colors. Now, once this is dry, I can go back over it and add different shadows and that sort of thing if I wanted to do that, or lighten different areas with a little bit more water if I wanted to do that. This glazing liquid seems to keep the paper intact, so it's not peeling the paper. So after we're done this layer, what I'll do is I'll show you on a page that we haven't done the glazing liquid on, and I'll show you what I mean by pilling the paper. Now this paper is a little bit better than coloring book paper, and it's a little bit higher weight than coloring book paper, and it's really nice and rough, which is really good for, of course, coloring books and painting. Painting it's really good for painting. With watercolors anyway. But we will give it a try on just a regular sheet of paper from the same book and see if it does the same thing or if it gives us that pilling effect that I've had problems with in other books. And I have tried different watercolor things in other books and or water-based ink things in other books and found that it was impossible to control and just made me mad because the picture was not turning out the way I wanted it to whatsoever and was just making a big old mess. This is going to be a difficult one. I'm completely going backwards here, so I'm pushing the paint instead of dragging it, which is not good for the paintbrush. But I was trying to avoid going over the lines, but I think we're just going to have to live with it. I'm going to rinse that a bit. Now, once again, if you rinse the color out from the previous color, make sure that you dry it off unless you want that amount of water to be there. So depending upon how much water you want to be or how much of a watercolor effect you want to have will depend upon how much water you want on your page. All right, so moving right along. Oh, I need the dark green. Now I do have other different watercolor markers as well, which we will be exploring a little bit more in the upcoming days throughout the month, as well as a couple of different sets of watercolor pencils and things like that. And I really do want to spend as much time going over different aspects of watercoloring, as well as different types of paper and that sort of thing. And I'm really hoping to have a special broadcast as well. But that's a secret. And until it's positive, I'm not saying nothing. Have Bob Ross join me. I don't think so, but yeah. Maybe we'll do a Bob Ross style painting or something. I know he used to use a lot of acrylics, but I'm pretty sure that I've seen him color and paint in water paint as well. I used to watch him all the time when I was learning how to paint with acrylics. And I did not get very good at it. I can do happy little trees all day long. That's about it. And sunny little mountains, wonderful little streams. But beyond that, no. I've seen some artists, just make absolutely wonderful, wonderful scenes and creatures and realistic looking people and everything else with acrylic paints. And nope, not me. Can't do it. I've tried. You should never say can't, but I have in fact tried, and it did not work well for me. And of course, I keep trying. So either I'm a glutton for punishment or I really enjoy learning, and I get mad at myself when I can't learn something or when I give up before I have learned something. That's the worst part, is if I give up before I've learned how to do it. Most times what I'll do is I'll play with it and play with it and play with it until I learn how to do it. And then I'll make a decision on whether or not it's something that I like doing or that gives the effect that I want. If it doesn't, then you may never see me do it again. Because sometimes if it doesn't give you the effect that you want, then it's just more of a wasting of precious moments when you could be doing what you do want to, or getting the effects that you do want. But make sure that you try it first and work out whether or not it is going to give you the effect that you want. Always try it on a separate piece of paper and experiment with stuff. Play with stuff. Don't just say, nope, I don't know how to use that, so I'm not going to. I do that all the time. And then I remind myself that all art is experimentation. So the more you experiment with it, the better you can get with it. And sometimes, especially with markers and things like the watercolors, I sit here and play with them for quite some time. The pan pastels was another one. I sat and played with those pastels for days before I decided that it was something that I was going to add to my pictures that I like the look of. Now I'm just rinsing this off because it's got a buildup of color on it. And I don't want a buildup of color on it. And then we just go. The one thing I like about these pens is they're very, very precise. They have a really, really good brush on them, which makes them a joy to work with. And they do come with this water brush that I'm using. And I did review them, so if you want to know a little bit more about them and how they work and what all the colors are and all that fun stuff, of course you can definitely watch my review of them. I did do a swatch and that sort of thing. I also even painted an entire picture with them. Other than this one. But as you can see, I am getting more and more control, more and more comfortable with the amount of ink I'm putting down, the amount of water I'm using out of my pen, and the effects that I want it to have. Now, if I wanted it to bleed a little bit more and spread a little bit more, I guess would be the word. Like if I wanted it to spread like this one up here. 1 sec, I gotta move it. If I wanted it to spread like this one up here or this one up here, I would just need to add a little bit more water. Because I don't like the spread of this one, what I would have to do is, of course, add less water. Now, once this is dry, I will go over these areas with the red and the pink and the blue and drag them down to cover up this green. And that's pretty much the only thing you can really do to eliminate that, as far as I know. If you know other ways of eliminating that spread that I'm not overly fond of on that part, I like the spread on the rest of it, but the green spread a little bit further than I wanted it to on that one. But if you know how to eliminate that without ruining the picture, let me know in the comments below, and I will be happy to try it. Like I said, this is a complete experimentation, and I am learning just as much as you are. The only thing that I know is the pens, the way that they're working for me, and that sort of thing. And like I said, just make sure that your brush isn't so full of water that you get beyond a spread where you're controlled. If you want to control the pen, then control the pen. If you want to control the ink, control the water. If you don't want a controlled inking and you just want it to do its own thing, put down as much color as you can possibly put down in an area and just let the water do its thing. And it will do its thing. It will spread that everywhere that it wants to go. Now, if this was a completely flat sheet of paper, like a heavier cardstock that stayed absolutely flat, I may try that. But because this is buckling in different areas, what's happening is if too much water gets on there, it runs across the buckle and just creates a little bit of a river instead of creating the look that I want. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm just going back over different areas and letting that water wake that ink up a little bit so that we can get a little tiny bit more of a bleed going, so that we get a little bit more purple and a little bit more of a seam. Seamless, I guess, would be the word. A little bit less of a seam. And I'm just going over the areas right down the seam just to give it a little bit more oomph, you know, a little bit more pretty. Just going to go over, I'm going to finish these two pieces up here, and then we're going to take another page out of the same book, and we're not going to glaze it. We're not going to prime it. We're just going to use it directly out of the book onto, you know, and we're not even going to tape it down, just to show you what it will do with directly out of the book. Because as you saw with the cardstock, on the swatches that I did, or not the swatches, the print-offs I did, even just the glazing liquid made that paper warp. And that's just because it's a liquid. When you introduce liquid to paper, it loosens that binding that holds the paper together. And they swell. They absorb the water and they swell. And it stretches it. And if you don't have it stretched tight, that water just stays there, and then it dries into the areas that they sit in, and then those areas just end up being bubbled. And the only reason why I know this is because growing up, I used to talk to my dad a lot about different things like paper and logging and paper mills and all that stuff, because where I grew up, there was a paper mill as well as the logging company and that my dad worked for and that sort of thing. So also we had a couple of different field trips as a child into the paper mill to see them make paper and how they do that. So that was always fun. And it was just, entertaining. And of course, I read a lot. So anything that made me curious, I read about. And paper and its reactions to water was one of those things. And I still get curious about it, and I still have troubles with it. But that's just human nature. I'm just going to add a little bit more water in this area just to get that flowing into the pink. Get rid of that seam. Now the paper is buckling, like it is bubbling up a little bit. And what I'm hoping is it's going to have the same effect that it did when I put down the glazing liquid. It did buckle up a little bit, but as it dried, it flattened out. So I'm hoping this will have the same effect and it will flatten itself back out. And then we just have a really pretty watercolor picture that isn't bled all over the place, out of the lines, and that sort of thing. And without any peeled paper. I think that's my biggest pet peeve with watercolor is the peeled paper. And with any sort of liquid ink, water-based ink, whether it be a water-based ink or an Indian ink that is water-based. I find it just peels up the paper and it drives me crazy. All right, so last one. And then we're going to put this aside to dry. And we're going to grab another piece of paper out of this Norberg and Linden book of practice pages. And we're going to see how these do on that without the glazing liquid and without drying times and whatnot. With just as much water as we're using here, I'm going to try to make sure that I still maintain the level of control that we've been able to reach here, so that we don't get a whole bunch of buckling, which is strictly the amount of water that you're putting down. if we get a lot of buckling, when we're not using a whole bunch of water, then it is definitely the paper that's doing it. And I can guarantee you that the paper is going to do it because it's just the nature of paper. When you add water to paper, it relaxes its fibers and it buckles. You add too much water to it and it dissolves. And that's just the nature of paper. Because all it is water, wood fibers, and glue. You use too much water and it breaks down those glue particles or the fibers of the wood if there is no glue particles because it's just pressed. And you have not so much paper anymore. You have wood fiber. Now, if it's a cotton or that sort of thing, it may be different. But I know as a kid we used to tear it all up or put it through a shredder and then soak it and just put it in a thing of water and watch it just slowly become mush. And then we would take the fibers and we would remake it into paper. Just by pressing it into a cookie sheet, cookie pan. Just press it in there, put it out in the sun to dry. Of course, it always changed the color of the paper, but it was fun to do. All right, so far so good. And as you can see, by the time I got to here, you can see the progression of control, the difference between here and here, and definitely there. I was starting off controlled, and then I went, yeah, I'm a little bit crazy with the water. Okay, so the further that you control how much water you have, the more ability you will have to maintaining a structured look to your piece. However, if you don't want a structured look to your piece and you want it to just do its thing, add more water. You know, if you add more water and just let it do its thing, you know, be messy with it. It will do its thing. You know. And that's the great thing about watercolor is sometimes you can let it just have its own life. You can let it just do its thing. You can cover the entire thing of paper and with water and just do its thing. Like I'm going to show you this just because I can. We're going to take this paint pen and we're going to see if there's any water left in it. We're going to put a drop of water, maybe two, and just move it around a little bit. I'm going to dry that off. And then we're going to take some cool colors here. We're going to let it do this thing with the purple. And then we're going to take this wonderful color here. And then we're going to take a nice bright red, I think. So as you can see, the paper has absorbed the water that we put down. But if we just add a little bit more to those edges, it's going to spread into each other and just make pretty, pretty, pretty designs like that. And that's what I mean by, watercolor has a life of its own. Now, if we leave this to dry, those colors will be combined and that sort of thing. And I'm just going to dry that off. Now, another thing that we can do that I showed you yesterday with the bubbles and that sort of thing is, of course, we can put down this amount of color and this amount of water and just dab it to lift up whatever water we don't want. So if that's the effect that you wanted, then you just dab it and lift up the excess water. But as you can see, the water and the watercolor, the colors of the markers, all took on their own life, combined together, and made something beautiful, which is wonderful. That's the joy of color. That's my joy of color anyway. Okay, so I've been playing long enough here. I'm going to quickly show you on a different piece of paper. So I'm going to move this out of the way so that we can grab the, oh, what did I do with it? Because, yeah, there it is. Could have swore I had it here, so I did. So I'm going to grab the practice pad, and we're just going to randomly pull a page out. So this is the first page in the pad after the one that I had just pulled out earlier. And we're going to take, let's take this purple, and we're going to color this in on the edges. And then we're going to take this, this purple, and we're going to color in here. Now, so far, this is doing quite well with the lack of peeling. Which is good. But we're going to take the watercolor brush to it, and we're going to extend those colors out into the outer ring here. And it seems to be doing okay peeling wise, which is great. But we do have a buckle going on there. And we're going to try it on the next one. I grabbed the wrong. Yeah, I grabbed the wrong one. I just want this one for this area. And I wanted, oh, where's the lighter purple I just used? I guess this one. I don't know why I put it back in there. Oh, it's in my hand. Duh. Oh, and put down the colors. Take our pen there. And I can feel the paper starting to move. And for some reason, I'm getting different colors. Weird. It may be because I put down that other one first instead of doing this one first. So there's more of a blue than the red violet kind of color there. But as you can see here, the paper is starting to curl up as we work. And I'm going to hold it down because I don't want it to curl too much while I'm trying to work it. Very strange. Rinse my brush. I think I've got an odd color on there or something. And the colors aren't blending as well on this paper. So as you can see, once you get a couple of different colors on there, it's fine. But as you add more colors to the wet paper, it's going to start peeling as it gets wetter. Now, this may not be a problem if you can control your brush, your colors. But the more you move that ink around, the more wet the paper becomes. As you can see in this area here, there's pieces of the paper that are starting to peel up. In this area right here. So, and as you can see, it is already peeling, buckling up. You can see it on the back of the page. Let's see if I can turn that light down a bit. So you can see it on the back of the page, the buckle. These areas here, if it was stretched, would have gone back together, but because it's not stretched, it's just going to gradually dry in that buckle. I'm not getting a lot of paper peel from this paper, which is phenomenal. I was expecting quite a bit more. There is a little bit, but it's not horrible. Very good. So these paint pens work really well on the coloring book paper with or without the glaze on it. With the glaze on it, I would definitely prefer to have the glaze on it. You can add the glaze first, let it dry, stretch it before you put your glaze on it, let it dry, and then add the paint colors. Now, I wanted to see if this works the same as markers does when you add light over dark. And it does to a certain extent, but not really all at the same time. The dark just seems to take over. So let's see what happens when we add water. And the dark really takes over then, doesn't it? Okay, so it doesn't work that way. So this is one of those things that you're going to have to either wait for the dark to dry before you add another color, or do butt-ups like this, where the dark comes into the light. Make sure that you put your light down first. But this paper is doing okay. As you can probably see in this one here that I have added quite a bit of water to. You can start to see the fibers starting to come up here under the ink. And that's completely natural. It's completely normal. And that's why you want to stretch it out, so that when those fibers do start to move and stretch and stuff like that, that you have it so that it lays completely flat while it dries. Once it's dry, it will shrink back into place and will be again completely flat. This paper did actually really, really well. I didn't get the problem that I normally have with coloring with paint pens on a coloring book paper. So kudos to Norberg and Linden. Their paper is fantastic, not only for colored pencils, but for watercolor too. Absolutely wonderful. All right, guys, I think I have not wasted, I have spent enough time with you today, and I will let you all get back to the things that you want to do today, including coloring. And I need to go out in public, which I don't like doing. I don't want. I gotta go grocery shopping, and if I don't, I'm gonna have a family lynching me. So, and that's unfortunately one of those monthly routine things that I need to maintain in order to spend as much time with you guys as I do. So I have to do my duties. Just like we tell our children, you have to do your chores before you can go and play. So of course, remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video or enjoy this watercolor month of funness and the idea of doing different mediums and learning together. Like I said, I'm not a professional at this. I'm not even proficient at it. I am learning just as quickly as you are with all of it. I will leave the link to the Poetique water paint pens in the description below, as well as the satin glazing liquid by Golden. I will leave a link to that as well. Of course, I'll let you know that I just recently became an Amazon affiliate. So all of the links that I will be providing and have provided yesterday and gone through and changed a couple of my videos to provide them. All of those links are affiliate links, and they do give me a couple of pennies if you click on the link and purchase the item that you clicked on. So if you enjoyed this video and you want to purchase the product, please do click on the link. It does help me out and helps me maintain the channel with new and improved things coming, as well as different prizes and of course shipping and that sort of thing. Of course, if you want to join us over on our Facebook channel, we would be happy to have you over there. Of course, the link is in the description below this video down there. Of course, remember to fill out the application. There is a couple of questions that need to be answered. This is to ensure that you're not a bot or a person that just wants to join our group to send out spam messages and scams. Those people don't usually answer the questions. So we do ask a couple of questions just to make sure that you are a proper person. So make sure that you answer those questions because we do not accept anybody into the group that doesn't. Last and absolutely not least whatsoever is always remember to relax, color, and stay safe. Thank you all for watching. You have a fantastic day, and I will see you all tomorrow for Thankful Thursday. All right, bye-bye, guys.